So, Dr. Cooper, if Coach Siggs Googled you, what sort of wins would his search come up with?
That job has been more about using a lot harder metrics like HRV training. We want a high HRV that demonstrates like a nice springy reactive autonomic nervous system that's demonstrating a more resilient state. There's evidence that suggests that leads to more flow state waves through the vagal nerve. And when all of you guys are working in sync like that, we're going to be faster.
Write it down and give me a call when you see that these predictions actually come about. Enjoy the games, have a great day, and look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.
Notre Dame.
I love that, dude.
Just like we're working on our footwork, just like we're working on having heavy, violent hands, just like we're working on our swim or our dip or our rip or how we zone block or come out from a tunnel, we have to work on how we respond to adversity. We have to work on the way we think. We have to work on the way that we process our emotions and express our emotions in a way that keeps your future goals in mind and is a betterment for the team.
Thanks so much for coming on, my friend. And I want to add that you're my first guest on the show, right? We're walking this new path together, and I'm excited to chat with you. You know, two former meat-headed football players doing the doctor thing. Welcome to United with BigTeam at Indiana University. This is our podcast on student-athlete mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Jesse Steinfeldt, and I'm super excited about today's episode. I'm talking to my friend and colleague, Dr. Jacob Cooper, about a whole host of interesting topics, right? Ranging from football to masculinity, to oxytocin, to oracles, to who knows what. Welcome, Dr. Cooper.
Hey, it's awesome to be here, Jesse. Thanks for having me on, brother.
Love it. So in honor of our historic and undefeated Indiana Hoosiers football team, we have a unique way of introducing our guest. So we're going to bring Dr. Cooper onto the show with the help of Coach Signetti. So Coach Siggs, let's get this started.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
So Dr. Cooper, if Coach Siggs Googled you, what sort of wins would his search come up with?
Well, I think the first one that might come up, if I'm being honest, is in 2023 when he was undefeated at JMU. App State went in there during college game day, and we gave him one of his only 3 losses in the past, 45 games. And at the time, they weren't eligible for the postseason, and that was a big storyline that year. And they were a phenomenal team, and App State got it done. I actually got to shake his hand. That was before he went to IU after the game. And so that might come up. He might be a little bit frustrated with me because that was maybe only I think one of 3 games he's lost. And then about myself, I'm really blessed. My background, I got to play college football. A scholarship for football is the only reason I got to go to college. And so I played for 4 years at a NAIA school in Upland, Indiana called Taylor University. I played center there and got to start throughout my career and be a team captain. And that was really where a love for sports psychology and helping others was cultivated with the brotherhood on that team and the coaches and professors I had. And then I moved on to Ball State, where I was extraordinarily blessed to work with Dr. Lindsey Blom, who's just an absolute rock star. And I did a dual master's in clinical and also sport psychology. And from there, I got really into sport-based youth development, which is a huge passion of mine, my thesis and dissertation. And then I worked with Dr. John McCarthy at Boston University, where I got my PhD, along with Dr. Amy Botzel, who is an absolute juggernaut in the research on self-compassion and mindfulness and how it interjects into sport performance. And so that was an amazing, tremendous, life-changing experience, moving out to Boston. Met my wife there, got integrated with a lot of the D1 teams, got to do some pro work. And it was just really, really thankful to learn from phenomenal mentors. And then I did a lot of clinical work with the military, some mental skill work with some Rangers, and then also worked in VA hospitals and got to learn a lot of awesome evidence-based treatments for trauma, pain management. So for years was really trained and kind of cut my teeth clinically working in military hospitals. And then my first, it feels like, adult job was in 2019. I got a call from Appalachian State, and they had never hired a sports psychologist before. I had been matched at the Asheville VA from Boston to Asheville, got married, we moved there, and they said, hey, we're looking to hire a sports psychologist. We've heard that you have a background in this. And I said, absolutely. And for the past 7 years, I've had the utmost honor of serving the athletes and coaches here at Appalachian State, where we've got 17 Division I teams and a growing team of sport psychologists to support them. And it's been, I always say, I'm living in the times that I prayed for. I've said that, and I've heard Carrie Guest say that a few times, one of your guys, and that's something that's been super true.
Awesome. That is a Googled intro to make Coach Siggs proud. He might be a little, bitter about the loss, but he'd be proud of that. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on, my friend. And I want to add that you're my first guest on the show, right? We're walking this new path together, and I'm excited to chat with you. Two former meatheaded football players doing the doctor thing. And man, you do a lot of things. So let's dig in. This can be fun. So I want to start by talking about your role embedded with the App State football program, particularly. Kind of run me through some of the tasks that you do with the team, so the audience can get a better understanding of how this can be structured with football in this space.
Yeah, the way we've tried to build it, and especially in this era where college football, I always say it's the professional model, but with amateur minds. Right. I've tried to learn from what some of the best in the business are doing. So I try to learn from and have conversations with Dr. Chris Carr, Dr. Desiree Festa, Dr. Sean Tyrens, Dr. Lonnie Lawrence, and see what they're doing at the NFL. Not all of that's replicable, obviously very different, but the way that I've gone about things here is keeping that in mind, is that this professional model. And so in that regard, it's really building a comprehensive model. So following the whole spectrum of care from when guys get here, conducting their mental health screeners one-on-one with me, providing ethical, confidential mental health services for the team, and then working through what I call performance adversity. So these are things that are subclinical, but obviously we could use some help. And so we have an example. There's a few different interventions that we've built out here that have gotten baked into the culture. But one is our injury clinic. So it's any athlete that goes through a significant injury, surgery, misses time, they're expected to meet with me once for 30 minutes. 86% of our athletes that do that choose to be seen for follow-up, either therapy or I have a 4-session injury clinic protocol. And that's where everything from going through the injury narrative to the emotional processing of that, to building skills for optimal recovery, and just educating them on the types of injuries. And that ends up becoming a tremendous place where I think guys grow in other ways. And that's an example of that. And then the final stop is obviously high performance mental training. I've been designing the mental training programs for our 17 teams here for the past 7 years, and then deploying those and hopefully helping with the transfer onto the field.
There's a lot to unpack there, lots of awesome things. And I want to start with the injury protocol piece, because I think that's important, because the culture of football is one of kind of the warrior, and you play through pain and all that. And that's fair, right? Because football is probably the sport, along with maybe MMA and other spaces, where you have discomfort and you have to be comfortable with that. But there's also then a threshold where when you're injured, you need to make yourself right. And sometimes that's hard for the men who play football to do that. How's that been received by the players, by the coaches, the injury protocol you put in place there?
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of home run. I think our data would support that. It's improved engagements. I think it's decreased repeated injuries. And then I think it puts out fires before they grow, because I think it creates a little bit more of it's a small ask. It's a 30-minute session, and then they can go from there if they want to follow up, either in a consultative capacity or a clinical capacity. And every year when I do feedback surveys, the guys talk about two things that were the most effective. They were like the injury clinic and you being there for me when I was hurt is the highest. And then I do occasionally, one of my techniques is I work out with the guys. And so we have certain mental training, days, and I get in the sauce with them. And they always say it was really good to see you suffer. And it really humanized you, and they're seeing me keeled over with some of the stuff we do, and those are the two big things that they said have been year after year. The feedback is like that was the most effective, was when you were shoulder to shoulder with us, when you were there when I was going through injuries, and what I learned in those spaces.
Yeah, how it's received by the coaches? Because I know in different places it's received different ways, right? We hear, I guess, horror stories, but more kind of normalized experiences where you go to the shame tent and you're ostracized. If you're injured, you're of no value. That's not a uncommon tale in football. So my curiosity is how this coaching staff received this sort of idea and then the implementation of it.
Yeah, I can't say enough about. I had the tremendous blessing to in my 7 years here, Scott Satterfield was here in 2018, 2019, a very caring man that took the program over from Jerry Moore, who's a legend, who was here for 30 years. He led the Appalachian State Mountaineers in that win over Michigan that put him on the map, and these are just phenomenal men. And then Eli Drinkwitz was here for a year, and so I got to work with him, and he was very supportive and proactive with my integration. But then the bulk of my time was with the late Sean Clark, who I can't speak enough of. Now, Sean recently passed away, but I got to work with him for 5 years. And the relationships, they take time to sometimes break into low help-seeking cultures, but he fully integrated me from the off-season to traveling with the team to being there for the guys when they're injured, to utilizing services and consultation, with helping support the staff on burnout and things like that. And his trust in me will forever change my career. And he was a phenomenal man, and I loved him like a brother. And may he rest in peace. And he's been dearly missed in the Appalachian State community. But that relationship was paramount. That building that trust. And really, I think that came after a couple of years of building reputation with the athletes. And then the athletes talk to the coaches, and eventually you kind of break yourself in, and you're able to do more proactive interventions that I think help with the well-being and resiliency of the team.
Yeah, being embedded in that space clearly helps, right? Not just some dude in office, and maybe it's kind of like the weird mystic thing. Why would I go to him? If it's someone I see, I know, docs, good people, right? There's gonna be buy-in. But also, I'm hearing you say the buy-in from the top is essential, right? With Coach Clark.
Absolutely, and that trickles down from our AD, Doug Gillen, too.
Okay.
Extraordinarily forward-thinking, mental health focused, wellness-minded, really cares about the athletes. And who they are as people. And I think it's a compliment to the culture at Appalachian State. But that leadership is everything. You can talk about it, but those men actually are about it. And that put me in a position to succeed and hopefully provide good, competent care, good, ethical, competent care.
That's amazing, right? That's the dream scenario for us in this field. I have a curiosity, so let's say you go to another place and that person doesn't exist. How do you sell it? How do you let them know that this is important when sometimes that's not always valued in that space?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is influence the spaces in which you can. So be an absolute phenomenal clinician. I think with coaches, it's important to be ethical and hold boundaries. I think that's hard at first for some coaches because they usually thrive on control because their jobs are on the line. But they actually respect when you do hold boundaries around confidentiality, and you find a way to help. You keep asking questions. Yes, I can't answer that, but ask some more questions, and you have a collaborative spirit. And then I think particularly for with sometimes male sports, like being around, like showing that buy-in. Like for me, I got permission showing up at practice, showing up at 6 a.m. workouts, mixing it up to the capacity that I could. Just showing. I think nobody really cares what you know until they know that you care. And I think you just live that every day and you do the little things that you can. And then I think the biggest thing is that when you get a shot, be ready as a clinician. Like be ready with a 5-minute quick talk that's effective, that you've sharpened, that you've honed, that I think can instantly maybe demonstrate some value on the wellness or performance front. And you might not get time to prepare. You might not get PowerPoints. Like you need to be prepared to stand and deliver right after practice. And then I think that can help you gain momentum as much as you can. But it can be a challenge big time.
It's a great point, right? And I talk to my students about that. Like you got to be ready for that moment, right? Again, and it's not a traditional linear path where, again, you can be, okay, give me my 15 minutes, my 30 minutes. I'll get my stuff ready. Sometimes it's on the fly. And again, I think that's a little bit, there's training clinically that's important, but a little bit of that's personality on some level too, right? The idea to be that confident in yourself and that prepared in that space to go down that road.
Yeah. And I think the turning point for me, Jesse, is I go back to, we have a tradition here at App. I try not to share too much of the secret sauce of some of the toughness out here, but we do a run. We run Howard's Knob, so it's only 2 miles. We run from the middle of the stadium, but you gain 1,600 to 1,700 feet of altitude within that time. And so it's an absolute crusher. And within 5 minutes, you're gassed, and it's an incredible mental exercise where your focus, your self-talk, staying together. I always challenge guys to speak to themselves, not listen to themselves, because your brain's first draft is going to produce nothing but negativity in that circumstance. And you go right to the mental dojo. And I was talking about this stuff, and the guys were like, "You have to run the knob with us. Like, you can't, you know what I mean?" And you know, it's 5:30 in the morning, and my first year here, I was like, "Well, let's go." And I think that was an opportunity and an inroad to put my money where my mouth was a little bit, and then I ran it with every team that ran it since I've done it, and it's a bit of a tradition here, and it's definitely a tremendous opportunity to experience some non-catastrophic pain that highlights the focal discipline, the autonomic nervous system regulation over a duration of time. Some guys can finish it in 20 minutes if they're really in shape. Some guys it's upwards of 30, 45 minutes where you're going to the house of pain and you really got to use those mental skills to finish. And so that was one point where I feel like the guys really bought in, and then and things kind of snowballed from there.
Nice. Where'd you finish in the pack? Where's your, to keep that
I'm not what I once was from a size perspective. I used to be 300 pounds. And so I very proudly finished with like the quarterbacks, linebackers. I think I surprised some of the guys. Every once in a while, I'll catch one of the skill positions. It's more slow twitch, so I can still hang. But yeah, I was proud to hang with more of the skill positions and not back with the heavy the heavy cavalry. It's one of those exercises where pounds equal pain. So
yes.
It's not really fair to the big 6'6", 300 pounders like at all. So but that's as best as I've done.
That's wicked impressive, my friend. That's awesome. So that kind of leads into some, conversation I have around ascribed credibility, right? The idea that, when you look the part or you've been the part, right? And in some levels that gives you access in those spaces. Has that been the case, with your football background there?
I always say visibility builds credibility. Yeah. And so whether you've been around it or not, just your presence is powerful. But absolutely, I think if you ask the guys, they'd say my background in football, that firsthand empathy I've gone through numerous injuries. What I hang up on my office is my injuries. Like I've got a X-ray of my broken leg, torn ACL, MRI. Like those are the things that I think that, it's when you've been to that school of suffering, you know how to respond with the right compassion that sometimes is learned. And I definitely think those experiences, it was almost like I was being prepared for this job before I started being prepared for this job more formally. And those definitely, I think, help with instantaneous buy-in with young men, but I don't think they're necessary. I think it's different for every approach. I have a unique stimulus value that I try to leverage with low help seeking men. And that might be a different approach I take with a different team or a clinician that's different than me.
Yeah, so with that, I agree. And both of us have that sort of unique ability to operate in that space. But again, when I train students or you work with colleagues, you don't have to look the part to show up and do the work. What advice or what perspective do you give to people who haven't played football? How do you get that credibility? How do you get that buy-in from the guys?
Yeah, I think that equally as effective is to remain incredibly culturally humble. And you can still provide culturally relevant care without that firsthand experience. And sometimes you could even leverage it as a strength, where you don't want to rely on your athletes to have to educate you on the sport. So do your research, like understand the game, understand football, understand the experience of athletes to the extent you can. But I think it's okay to also just acknowledge maybe the identity differences in the room or the sport experiences in the room, and ask them to be like, well, help me, inform me a little bit, because sometimes that experience as a football player can work against you if you just assume you know what they're going through. Because my experience is just one guy that played football, at a different time. And so you don't want to overly lean on that. And you definitely do not need it to be incredibly effective. And I think sometimes the humility of educating yourself and then asking questions about their experience can be incredibly therapeutic. But I would definitely recommend with any sports you haven't worked on to jump in, what I mean? Like to get familiar with the resources, the structure of the game, the equipment. Don't be afraid to play that novice beginner humble card and learn on your own about things. And I think athletes are usually overjoyed to share their experience and can sometimes really appreciate not having to educate you on the sport, but the fact that their experience, they're sharing with you from a more of a curious beginner perspective. And I think it can actually be a therapeutic tool.
It's a great point. I mean, the reality is we are a process expert, not content expert per se, right? The idea of competitive process and how we work, and we don't have to know how to run out route or how to, shade the nose guard or anything like that. I mean, there can be value in that. It's interesting you talked about the idea that it can sometimes be over leaned into, and I think that's important. I had a clinical experience that helped me with that way back when I was working in a college counseling center, and the football coaches sent a kid over to me, strong safety, had dealing with depression. He was an absolute missile, right? But he had depressive stuff and stuff like that. And they sent him to me thinking, the football guy will be great. Yeah. It turned out that I looked like every single coach who called him a slapdick or told me he was lazy. And so it took a while to build that rapport because he was really standoffish. And again, functionally so. So there's times when our, look that does give access can also be problematic. So I think it goes back to your point about that humility of who am I? I'm here to help you. I'm here to understand you in your space versus I'm the expert. I did this. I know what's happening, right?
You just hit something really important that I'll say has been imperative here is, one of the things we did early was I worked Doug Middleton, who's this awesome advocate for mental health, played in the NFL, App State guy, drafted by the Jets. He has put together a network of providers and sport therapists kind of in the North Carolina area, particularly therapists of color. And one of the things that I would do when I work with guys here is say hey, I'm going to be the direct service provider for a lot of guys, but there might be issues that are very important or salient to certain parts of your identity where you want to work with a clinician of color. So we built a network here at App State because we're in a rural area where if an athlete, and I talk about it in my intro meeting with any team, is if you'd like to work with a different clinician, we have the capacity, we have a foundations fund and a network to be able to refer you if that's a salient part of what you're looking for in a clinician. And the feedback from the athletes on that has been very positive. And there's been so many guys that initially came to me that I got connected with a different therapist because part of what they wanted to work on was a part of their identity as a black male. And then they came back 6 months later and they said, Doc, that meant the world to me. I really want to work with you now. I really want to, can we transition care here? This is a little more convenient. I really trust you. But I do think that piece played an incredibly role, and I think they did good work with the clinicians that we referred them to. But I do think that's a really important piece that you hit on, and it sparked that reminder of how imperative tapping into our alumni networks and other providers, not trying to be all things to all people, and just proactively as psychologists acknowledging the differences, things that athletes might be looking for, and then providing gateways of connection. You sometimes you can want to demonstrate value, but the best thing you can do is just reward that help seeking and connect them for what they need.
That's amazing, right? It's an amazing way to connect and to provide a lot of different things to different people. And again, help seeking in this particular population, right? We know the data is pretty strong that men generally don't seek help. Male athletes are less likely to seek help. Male athletes of color, even more so, less likely to seek help.
Yeah, so it's an amplifier compounding effect.
Correct. And so what helps break through? You just talked about that program. That's great. What other things, help break through that socialization of, stoicism? I don't need help.
Yeah. Oh, I think modeling it. I think a lot more is caught than taught. And so if you'll ask anything about these guys, these men have, the athletes here have seen me cry probably more than they've seen a lot of other men cry. I'll stand up in front of them with tears in my eyes and work through as we talk about a model of comprehensive masculinity, as we talk about being controlled aggression on the field, but then super compassionate and loving within the relationships off. And we'll talk about our heart, we'll talk about our soul, we'll talk about some, our values in those spaces. I do think learning emotional discipline is incredibly effective for high performance, but it's a life skill. Yeah. And so a lot of the work we do, of course, we're going to hit focus, we're going to hit relaxation and integration of teammates and communication and stuff, but we're also going to hit a lot of emotional intelligence pieces, communication and interoception. What am I feeling? How am I feeling? When do I work on that? And how do I let that drive connection? One way specifically, I think, is we talk a lot about compartmentalization. And compartmentalization will always get a hero's welcome on the field. But if we over-rely on compartmentalization, it'll lead to disintegration.
Exactly.
Emotionally. And so a time to be tough and a time not to be tough. And so sometimes that's in how we wind down. Sometimes that's how we emotionally process. And I think the biggest thing for guys, this generation of men, they're more in touch with their feelings. I have these feelings, I know what they are. What do I do with them? And so we're developing protocols for how to decompress, express our emotions, but really let it drive connection. Like this is where I start getting fired up. Is like it's information, not direction, that can drive connection to your brother on the field, drive connection to whether it's a parent or a pastor or a therapist. Like that's that emotion. While there is a time when we need to compartmentalize it, there's also information there that we want to access, and then let it drive us closer to connection and the men that we want to be. And so I was a little all over there, but I do think that blending, I think, some of the performance piece, because everybody wants to get better. Like every guy is looking for the edge. They're always looking for their 1%. And a lot of times those conversations subtly shift into these things that also translate to them as boyfriends, them as fathers. I work with a lot of guys with kids, as sons. And that's where I feel like you sometimes start in the lane of performance, but then it blends into the therapeutic space, which is why I think it's so important to kind of be dually trained, because it can shift session to session.
Couldn't agree more, man. You hit on some gold nuggets there, man. That's a lot of good stuff. And the reality is we need them to perform, right? We need to help them perform, and they need to compartmentalize and maximize, do all these things. But ultimately, we all stop playing, right? Ultimately, that piece of the football part of us is going to be gone, and we need to be husbands. We need to be partners. We need to be fathers. And training that emotional connectivity, Doc, is just an amazing, amazing thing. And to have it modeled, right? To be, again, a big bald dude who cries, that might not be something that's in their repertoire, but when they see it might be okay, right? It's not terrible, right? And I love that, the modeling piece on top of the helping them connect piece. I think those are two amazing things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate it, and I think that's the goal a lot of times. Like I think it was Jason Wilson, who's a great author, and he works with youth in Detroit. He coined that term, comprehensive masculinity, and I think you want to model that, and you hopefully have coaches that model that, and support staff that can model that, and then you help them pivot from like, well, that's not a matter of will, that's a matter of skill. And so just like we're working on our footwork, just like we're working on having heavy, violent hands, just like we're working on our swim or our dip or our rip or how we zone block or come out from a tunnel, like we have to work on, how we respond to adversity. We have to work on the way we think. We have to work on the way that we process our emotions and express our emotions in a way that's keeps your future goals in mind and is the betterment for the team. And I think that pivot, as soon as you can connect with that it kind of takes the pressure off, because I think a lot of guys think, well, I should just have all that mental stuff figured out. And I'm always like, I didn't get a class in that. Right. It's like, who said that? Like, those are things that we need training in as well, and for life. And I think that framing, once guys see that, it's almost like they have permission to not have to be perfect in that. It's not everything's an act of will. It's just this skill. And just like at one point I had to learn how to come off the line, and keep my pad level low, I have to work on asking my girlfriend if she would like me just to listen or solve the problem. You know what I mean? And what do you need? And how can I support you right now? And like, those are skills that start off maybe a little bit harder and clunky, but then they become more authentic as we integrate them intentionally.
Yeah, that you're trying to crack the code there. I like it. And that's an evolving thing, right? That's not something that you get to mountaintop and have. This is, again, a lifelong pursuit. Again, that comprehensive masculinity coming into play. Again, we see it in football. It's an easy laboratory to witness it. But, you've talked about some of your work with other populations, military, other places. How does that manifest itself in those spaces?
Yeah, so I think a couple other spaces that I've gotten the opportunity to work in. So in the past, I've done some work with the Army Rangers and preparing them for RASP training, which is, there's actually a Fort Bragg here in North Carolina where they do RASP training, which is like a 2-month grueling process. That's first half's like really physical, a lot of land navigation, sleep deprivation, and then the second half is a little bit more weapons, tactical pieces and stuff like that. So that's one. I've gotten to work with some Rangers and preparing for them for graduating, and then when they go to get deployed. And then the other population is the past 3 years I've been the in-house consulting psychologist for Joe Gibbs Racing, so NASCAR. So getting to work with pit crews, drivers, crew chiefs, and some of their executive staff on improving well-being, and then also improving cohesion, because everything's about speed. And I always say, in cohesion, there's speed. When when a unit is cohesive, there's less friction and there's more speed. So those are some of the populations that I'm also have ongoing experience with at this time.
Mm-hmm. And do you see commonalities across then, I assume? Things that are,
I think with some of the things that we talked about with regards to the low help seeking, with regards to some of the cultural break-ins and stuff, there's definitely some crossover. But there is very unique cultural factors that kind of lead into kind of how we approach and how we kind of work there. Obviously with racing, there's a lot more engineering-minded individuals. And so that job has been more about using a lot more, for example, harder metrics like HRV training, with the individual athletes, wearables for their HRV, where we demonstrate to them when they're, I call it getting hijacked mentally, like you're hijacked mentally, your HRV drops through the floor. We want a high HRV. It demonstrates like a nice springy reactive autonomic nervous system that's demonstrating a more resilient state. There's evidence that suggests that leads to more flow state waves through the vagal nerve. And when all of you guys are working in sync like that, we're going to have, we're going to be faster. And so they really look at metrics. So they really appreciate, we do a pit stop, we go this fast, and then we look at the data and science of our system and where were we? Were we hijacked? Were we all over the place? Or were we more in the physiological space that is more indicative of flow? And more indicative of that nice responsive, nervous system versus more reactive or not responding in an effective way for high performance.
It's amazing because you're talking about some really sophisticated physiological pieces, and then you're breaking it down for immediate execution and the flow. What's that like for you? How do you do that? How do you pull that off?
Yeah, so it started, the seed that got planted for that was when I used to work, one of my first teams that I got the blessing to work with was Boston University hockey. And BU hockey's king. I mean, they're
awesome.
Football fans out there. I mean, they're the former Alabama, the new IU of hockey. And when I got to work with the team for a national championship, and so one of the things it started with just like breathing and focal points on the ice and helping guys like how do you kill a power play? You know what I mean? When you're on defense and putting them and asking the players to as I'm working with them one-on-one, visualize those spaces. Where does your focus go? How are you going to regulate your heart rate in those moments so that you can stay optimal? Vicky Woosley with the Nashville Predators, she's done some phenomenal work with, I think, taking this to the next level, where really demonstrating wearables and stuff. And so I'd let her talk more about that, I think, with NASCAR. And I called her because I was like, I want to do more of this with NASCAR because I think it bodes well. That's where things started. So, for example, what you might do, in NASCAR, we have like a pressure pit stop. Like the way NASCAR works is that the entire 4-hour race can come down to a last-second pit stop.
Right.
And it's a wild sport. It's an absolutely wild sport. Like it is, you could be lapping the field, and there could be a fluke flat tire, and everybody could come in, and whoever gets off pit road first is going to win the championship. And this stuff happens all the time. So there's all this pressure on this 5-man team to deliver a sub-9-second pit stop and no errors, right? And so we might do a visualization while they're wearing wearables that demonstrate their HRV. And so we put them in that situation, have them execute, right? Demonstrate, okay, where'd your heart rate go? Where'd your HRV go when your body was responding to that stress? And it might be all over the place. And then I might cue, like, okay, now I want you guys to breathe in this way. And I'd give them a certain pattern of breathing that's optimal maybe for the right level of juice when you're going, over, we call it going over the wall.
Right.
And then maybe these focal points, I really want you to focus, I call them optimal performance cues. They're just the external narrow cues that when I focus on these, they lead to increased a probability of success. And so then we'll do a stop, and then I will take them through. Like everybody breathe in this way. Visit your OPCs, which are like 2 to 3 anchor points.
Okay.
Reset your mind on those anchor points, and we'll do another stop. And then I'll show them the data that their HRV was different that stop. And 9 times out of 10, the stop with the higher HRV went better. They were more in that flow state. Right. And so they're able to see a little bit of biofeedback in these like controlled areas. Now, the tricky part is that there's not a lot of wearables that you can move around a lot in. Okay. And so we're working on some stuff, and there's some technology, but that's kind of the gap right now is the signal can get disrupted, and sure. But you can usually get a good signal with certain apps that you can show you what it was post hoc.
Right. The technology will catch up eventually.
Yeah, I think so. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too, again, for our listeners, the idea of we're talking about these really sophisticated concepts that are really useful, but it comes down to practice, right? You're talking about not just all of a sudden doing it when you're in the pit at the last stop. you got to practice it. You got to know what your body's doing before you get in that space. And mental skills, and understanding your body very much need to be practiced in the same way that physical skills do, if not more.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot of cool stuff, and there's more stuff to cover. I want to pivot into have a fun thing. You and I have talked in the past about the amazing ability of your father to see things that other people can't see. Right? He's got the gift, the oracle. Tell me a little bit about kind of your dad's history and being that prophet of sorts.
Yeah, my father is a great man. I love him very much. He's from Fallsview, West Virginia. He now lives in Lima, Ohio, and he's a man of heart. That's how I would describe him. He's an emotional guy. I say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree in that regard. And he's pretty good at some level of sometimes prophetic discernment when it comes to sports. Now, he's not right all the time. He's like a gut guy, but he does tend to get it right way more than he gets it wrong, particularly around football, which he played and I played, and so. I as the story goes, you and I, as we were just talking and catching up about football, I sent Jesse a screenshot, and it was my dad very bullishly predicting that not only was IU going to beat Oregon in the regular season, he's like, they're going to beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship this year. And so he was 2 for 2 there.
Way before the band got the juice and was moving. Your dad was the fuel of
before the momentum even started. I think he had seen what was going to come out of Signetti, and he's a Pennsylvania guy. My dad's a Yinzer through and through, and so I think he loves Signetti, and he kind of had an eye for it, and he's been right on the money with what's transpired this season.
And that is near and dear to my heart. By the time this hits the air, we'll know what's going to happen in the national championship game. But right now, Indiana's undefeated. They've had a historic rise. I mean, they are steamrolling people. So they're going to play Monday night in the national championship game. And so I want to play this clip for our viewers to experience the beauty of the prophet and see how they can also understand how your pops makes this work.
Yeah.
Hi there, this is Bill Cooper in Lima, Ohio. It is January 14th, 2026. I was asked to give my prediction on the NCAA Division I National Championship game, and it's a little premature for this in my opinion, but I was asked to give my opinion on the Super Bowl this year. So, may it go on record that on this day, I predict the Indiana Hoosiers to defeat Miami by the score of 31-24. And in the Super Bowl, the Buffalo Bills finally get that Super Bowl win. They will beat the Seattle Seahawks 31-28, and it's going to be great for Buffalo because they've been there many times but lost every time they went. Write it down and give me a call when you see that these predictions actually come about. Enjoy the games. Have a great day. And look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.
Notre Dame.
I love that dude. So
he
awesome.
sent that having no idea where it was going, man. He just teed it up and let it fly.
He's about ready to be nationally on the scene, right? This is a national podcast. His delightfully polite offer to be called, might have to give some people the digits, for a cost.
Yeah,
right?
it happens, man.
He needs to monetize now, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So here in Indiana, obviously people are excited. We are pumped. It's a whole new level of energy. A little bit newfound money, right? We've kind of generationally knew it in basketball, and now we're starting to know in football, and it's a great thing. So, and one of my good college buddies is a Buffalo guy, so Dave Spiker is going to love the fact that your pops gave the Bills some love because he's Bills
Let's
Bop.
go, Buffalo!
That's awesome. So what I want to do is kind of pivot. One final thing. Again, you and I could sit here for hours and hours and hours, and we're probably going to have different segments of this. Doc, have you come back and do this? But I wanted to talk more from a macro level, right? Because you talk about all the work you do in with the team and the university and all the great stuff you do, but football then is a bigger part of the community and life, right? So two different situations. We had the Hurricane Helene in 2024 that ravaged the Boone community, and you referenced the late great Coach Clark having passed. Tell me a little bit about kind of how your role is in your capacity helping heal, helping men, helping deal with these, real life situations that are bigger than football, but football puts us in that space.
Yeah. It was definitely no playbook for all of 2024 here in Boone, North Carolina. The community was ravaged by, I think it went down as the second worst hurricane or natural disaster, I think, in U.S. history. And so there was a lot of folks that lost their lives. We had community members that lost their lives and homes, and it was absolutely devastating. And so, during the process, I still remember we were getting ready to play Liberty, and I was like, there's no way they're going to cancel this game. And then it became very clear on Friday when everything was hitting that they were going to cancel the game and that our community was never going to be the same. And really, the initial process was just finding lines of communication, making sure people were okay. My role as an associate athletic director for sport psychology, mental wellness was really just establishing a line of communication with the athletes because everything was out, and once my family was okay, just getting feedback from the athletes. And the biggest thing that they were looking for, obviously we have a lot of people from the area, was just communication that their families were okay. And some of the immediate work was trying to be communicate. You know what I mean? It was like a dystopic fiction here, man. There was big gaping holes in the road that would go down hundreds of feet, mudslides. There was a house, I can send you some photos of, houses that were just picked up by the waters, and they were just up against bridges, and I won't get more graphic with some of the other things, but it was unreal. And helping people immediately just get communication, shelter, needs met. Red Cross moved into the home center, which is where we play basketball, and it was everything from feeding frontliners to helping provide some psychological safety for people that were making their way there, to just supporting the supporters. And then for me, it was helping communicate. And we had a bunch of football players that wanted to volunteer. And I was really proud of our athletes. It was like giving them a means to connect and help the community that was appropriate, that was helpful and safe and things. And so a lot of communication factors there. So the immediate was an absolute whirlwind. And then obviously there's been a year of fallout and reconstruction because the community is never going to be the same,
right.
From that. But I'll pause there because it was a lot, and it was deeply impactful. That's where the kind of mountain strong community really rose, and it was remarkable. I mean, what happened was mainly speared by the community here because people couldn't get to us, and there was churches. It was Samaritan's Purse, which is a global agency that's based out of Boone. Just neighbors helping neighbors, digging people out. We had football players digging people out of their homes, and it was inspiring at the time, scary and terrifying, but looking back, it's such an inspiring time where I think some of the best attributes of Appalachian State and mountain culture were on display.
I love that, man. And again, when you're down, what are you about, right? And again, to find the ways that the football players were integrated, right? The community and everybody coming together and helping raise ourselves up off this space. That's bigger than the game, right? You get caught up in performance and wins, losses, and other stuff that are important. But I think situations like that really tell you what is important and what are you made of, right? What sort of ways can you interact with your community and make the place better when they really need you?
Yeah, and then I can say clinically, they canceled the game with Liberty, which was a big G6 on G6 powerhouse battle, both well-known, strong programs. And then we went down and played Marshall 7 days later. I remember texting you, and you were like, "Are you here?" And I was like, It was a standing 8 count, but we're here. We got guys without food, without places to live, but we're down here ready to play a game."
Right.
And then we came back, and one of the things with the guys was helping them psychologically. We're like, there's bigger things going on. They wanted to help the community. There was sometimes some limbic friction or dissonance with playing the game. You know what I mean? And so a lot of was holding that space for them and helping them see, there's research on when there's natural disasters, tsunamis, hurricanes. One of the first things that they'll do in the areas is introduce soccer or play again to give some level of stability and permission and helping those guys see they have an opportunity here if they want to contribute to a little bit of an escape and a little bit of a stabilizer during a time where everything is out of the control of our community. And the guys really rallied behind that, and they rattled off 3 home victories against really good teams. And Jason Kelsey came out here and rallied the community. I got to chat with him for
awesome.
like an hour, man. He's like, and so there ended up being this strong, mountain strong, response. But in the immediate, there was this huge disconnect from guys feeling this doesn't feel important right now, right? And it was a lot for a young man to have to process. And so I was doing a lot of individual work with guys and staff on that in the front, in the trenches of it all as it was unfolding.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And then with that too, we see that the ripple effect out. And then we introduced, Coach Clark, who was part of that process. Then passing is not just the immediate community, the ripple community, but beyond, right? Because he was at Central Florida when he passed, but still it has an impact waves throughout, of course, when you have someone of that magnitude. What was that process like for you being, again?
Well, I think that whole response and that mountain strong resiliency was a direct reflection of their leader in Sean Clark. That guy had a heart and loved in a way that I always say only offensive linemen can. And that team loved him, and that community loves him. He played at App. He's an App guy through and through. And the team really reflected his heart and compassion for the community and his resilience and grit to keep digging. That was the phrase that Coach Clark always said. He had a big pickaxe that he would keep by his door. He says, just keep digging. You keep digging. You keep moving your feet. And they really embodied that grit. And they did that throughout seasons as he coached, and they did that in the way they responded to the hurricane. And really his leadership was paramount. He led with an emotional honesty and an intellectual humility, and and that was contagious, to the guys. And that's something we really miss. And, I personally have been deeply impacted with his passing this past fall. That's still something we're unpacking here at App State.
Yeah, it'll be ongoing, right? Again, the legacy factor of what he is and who he is doesn't end, but it moves forward like that. Yeah. Oh.
Amen.
I hear you. Well, we've hit our time. Again, I have a zillion more things to ask, but again, you and I are going to grab some beers and talk about it in different places, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast. But I'll say this, Jacob, this was a home run for me. Professionally, my first podcast I've ever hosted. I couldn't have asked for a better guest, a more engaging guest, a more informed guest, and a guest with a cooler dad. I don't think that's a possibility for me to hit. So I so appreciate you, my friend. I admire the work you do, and I really, really, really appreciate you coming on and letting our listeners hear about this. This is really important stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse. Be blessed, man, and I'm looking forward to those beers and more conversations.
Amen. And hopefully we're talking about some Indiana champions. So again, for United, Dr. Jacob Cooper, Dr. Jesse Steinfeldt signing out. Have a great one.
Third overtime, 44-41, and a touchdown wins it. Snap back to Helinski, drops back, has time, passes left, caught, made at the catchment of the 20-yard line, more onto the 10, runs for the win, dives for the pylon. Touchdown, Washington State.